The space station buzzed with muted energy, a kaleidoscope of alien voices blending into a low hum. The coffee shop nestled in the corner of the trade hub was an oasis of calm, its soft yellow lights spilling warmth across the eclectic furniture and patrons. Daniel leaned back in his chair, nursing a mug of something vaguely resembling coffee, a local brew he'd grown to tolerate. He liked this place. It felt neutral, unjudging, a patch of normalcy in the vast, unpredictable galaxy. Across the room, the door slid open with a faint hiss. A tall figure entered, draped in a sleek, dark cloak that caught the light like liquid metal. Daniel's gaze lingered. There was something about the newcomer, an aura that demanded attention. The figure moved with quiet purpose, almost feline, their form vaguely humanoid but with subtle, unplaceable differences. They settled in the farthest corner, alone, their posture rigid and reserved. Daniel tried not to stare but failed. Travelers of all kinds passed through the station, but this one exuded an undeniable gravity, as if the space around them bent ever so slightly to their will. Yet their expression, or what Daniel could make of it, seemed strangely weary, maybe even lonely. He shook his head, chuckling to himself. "Focus on your own problems, man," he muttered, taking another sip of his coffee. But the sight of the solitary figure nagged at him. He'd been in their shoes before, new to a place, unsure if anyone would bother to reach out. After a moment's hesitation, Daniel stood and approached the counter. "Two of whatever they're having," he said to the barista, nodding toward the figure in the corner. The barista, a feline-like alien with shimmering scales, raised an eyebrow but complied, handing him 2 steaming cups. With a deep breath, Daniel crossed the room. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice light but tentative. The figure looked up, their eyes a piercing gold that seemed to see straight through him. For a moment, Daniel wondered if he'd made a mistake. "Do as you please," came the reply, the voice low and smooth, carrying an accent Daniel couldn't place. It was neither welcoming nor dismissive, but it was enough. Daniel slid into the seat across from them, setting one of the cups on the table. "Figured you could use a refill," he said with a grin. The figure regarded the cup with an inscrutable expression before lifting it to their lips. A long, quiet sip followed. "This is acceptable," they said, setting the cup down with a soft clink. "You are bold, human, to approach a stranger so freely." Daniel shrugged. "Bold? Maybe. Or just bored. You look like you could use some company." For the first time, the figure's lips quirked into something resembling a smile, though it didn't quite reach their eyes. "And what makes you think I seek companionship?" "Well, you didn't say no," Daniel shot back, leaning back in his chair. "Besides, I've been to enough of these stations to know the look. Sitting alone, watching everyone else. You're either waiting for someone or trying to figure out how to be part of the crowd." The figure tilted their head, as if studying him. "And which are you?" Daniel chuckled. "A bit of both, I guess. Name's Daniel, by the way." There was a pause before the reply came. "I am Zorvaxx." "Nice to meet you, Zorvaxx." Daniel took another sip of his coffee. "So, what brings you here? Business? Pleasure?" "A bit of both." Zorvaxx hesitated, their golden eyes flickering as if weighing how much to reveal. "Observation," they said finally. "This station is diverse. It offers insight into the galaxy's many inhabitants." Daniel nodded. "Yeah, it's a melting pot, all right. I've seen species here I can't even name. Makes you realize how big the universe is, huh?" Zorvax's gaze softened slightly. Indeed, the conversation drifted from there, meandering like a slow river. Daniel spoke of his travels, sharing anecdotes about strange planets and peculiar customs. Zorvaxx listened intently, their guarded demeanor slowly giving way to genuine curiosity. Occasionally, they offered cryptic comments about the nature of the galaxy, hints at a perspective far grander than Daniel could fathom. "You've seen a lot, haven't you?" Daniel asked at one point, his tone more serious. Zorvaxx looked away, their expression unreadable. "More than most," they said softly. "And yet, there is much I have yet to understand." Before Daniel could press further, the door to the coffee shop slid open again. A new figure entered, their movements sharp and predatory. They scanned the room, their gaze lingering just a moment too long on Zorvaxx. Daniel noticed the way Zorvaxx's shoulders tensed, the subtle shift in their posture. "Friend of yours?" Daniel asked quietly. Zorvaxx's voice was low, almost a growl. "No." The tension in the room thickened. The newcomer approached the counter, ordering something, but their eyes kept darting back to Zorvaxx. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He'd seen enough bar fights and back-alley dealings to recognize trouble when it walked through the door. "Everything okay?" he asked, keeping his voice casual. Zorvaxx's gaze met his, and for the first time, Daniel saw something raw and vulnerable beneath the polished exterior. "Perhaps not." Daniel's mind raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. Whatever was going on, he'd stepped into it now. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he wasn't about to walk away. The stranger's gaze locked on his Zorvaxx, a predatory gleam in his eyes. His movements were deliberate as he approached, the sound of his boots on the floor sharp and the coffee shop's quiet. Daniel's fingers tightened around his cup. He didn't know what this was, but every instinct told him it was about to go sideways. "Zorvaxx," the stranger said, his tone cold and authoritative. "You've strayed far from your throne." Daniel's brows furrowed. "Throne?" He glanced at Zorvaxx, whose jaw had tightened. The air around them seemed to thrum with a barely contained tension. "I am here by my own will," Zorvaxx replied. "You have no authority to interfere." "That's where you're wrong." The stranger reached into his coat, and Daniel caught the glint of a weapon, a sleek, alien pistol humming with latent energy. "The bounty is clear. Your will cease to matter the moment you left Imperial space." Daniel didn't hesitate. He shoved the table forward, knocking the stranger off balance. The pistol discharged with a sharp whine, the energy bolt searing past Daniel's ear and burning a jagged scar into the wall behind them. The coffee shop erupted into chaos, patrons scrambling for cover as chairs and cups clattered to the floor. "Run!" Daniel grabbed Zorvaxx by the arm and hauled him toward the exit. They burst into the station's main corridor, the din of fleeing footsteps behind them. Zorvaxx followed without protest, though his eyes burned with a mixture of anger and something Daniel couldn't quite place. "What the hell is going on?" Daniel demanded as they wove through the crowded thoroughfare. "Who was that guy, and why did he just try to vaporize you?" Zorvaxx's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's a bounty hunter, likely hired by one of the factions seeking to destabilize my empire." "Empire?" Daniel felt a jolt of disbelief. You're a king or something? An emperor?" Zorvax's tone was flat, as if the title carried more burden than pride. "And I have no time to explain further. They will be hunting us." They ducked into a side alley, the neon glow of alien advertisements casting fractured light across their faces. Daniel leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His mind whirled. Zorvaxx, this quiet, brooding figure he'd bought coffee for, was royalty? He thought back to their conversation, the hints of weariness and isolation. It all made sense now, but it didn't make their situation any less dangerous. The bounty hunter's footsteps echoed down the corridor behind them. They had only seconds. "You're faster than you look," Daniel muttered. Zorvaxx didn't reply. Instead, he reached for a small device tucked beneath his cloak. A faint shimmer rippled across his skin, and suddenly his humanoid form melted away. In its place stood something far more imposing, a towering, dragon-like creature with scaled wings folded tightly against its back and eyes that glowed like molten gold. The sheer force of his presence seemed to press against the very air, as if the station itself bent beneath his power. Daniel's mouth went dry. "Okay, that's new. I did not wish to reveal my true form," Zorvaxx said, his voice deeper and resonant now. "But there is no longer any point in hiding." The bounty hunter rounded the corner, weapon raised. His eyes widened at the sight of the Emperor's true form, but he didn't hesitate. He fired again, the bolt streaking toward them. This time, Zorvaxx moved faster than thought. With a sweep of his tail, he deflected the blast, sending it ricocheting off a nearby wall. "You cannot defeat me," Zorvaxx growled. "Leave, and you may yet live." The bounty hunter's expression twisted into one of defiance. You're worth too much alive. Daniel stepped forward, fists clenched. You want to go through him, you'll have to go through me first. The hunter snorted. A human? Pathetic. Daniel didn't give him time to finish the insult. He lunged, tackling the hunter before he could aim his weapon again. They hit the ground hard, grappling for control. The pistol clattered away, spinning across the floor. The hunter, stronger than Daniel had anticipated, managed to pin him, his fists raining down with brutal efficiency. Pain exploded across Daniel's ribs, but he gritted his teeth and refused to let go. A deep, rumbling snarl echoed through the alley. In a flash of movement, Zorvaxx closed the distance between them. He seized the bounty hunter by the collar and lifted him effortlessly into the air, claws gleaming under the station's neon lights. Enough, Zorvaxx commanded. Your pursuit ends here. The hunter struggled, but it was futile. Kill me if you want, he spat. Another will take my place. Perhaps, Zorvaxx said, his gaze unwavering. But they will know what awaits them. With a final flick of his wrist, he hurled the hunter to the ground. The man groaned, defeated but alive. Daniel pushed himself to his feet, wincing. Remind me never to tick you off. Zorvax's fierce expression softened as he turned to Daniel. You risked yourself for me, even when you did not know who I was. Why? Daniel shrugged, wiping blood from the corner of his mouth. I didn't need to know. You look like someone who needed help. That's enough for me. For a moment, Zorvaxx said nothing. Then he nodded, a small but genuine gesture of gratitude. If you have shown me such kindness. The bounty hunter stirred, muttering something under his breath. Zorvax's wings unfurled slightly, their sheer size casting long shadows across the alley. Go, he said to the hunter, and tell those who sent you that I am not so easily captured. The hunter scrambled to his feet and fled, disappearing into the bustling crowd. Silence settled over the alley once more. Daniel exhaled, tension draining from his body. So, what now? Zorvax's gaze lifted toward the stars beyond the station skylight. Now, we decide how far we are willing to go to change our fates. Daniel couldn't help but smile despite the ache in his ribs. Sounds like an adventure. Indeed, Zorvaxx said, his golden eyes gleaming. And together, they stepped back into the light. The station's medical bay was quiet, bathed in sterile light that reflected off the polished floors. Daniel sat on the edge of a cot, his ribs freshly bandaged. He winced as he adjusted his posture, watching Zorvaxx across the room. The Emperor, now back in his humanoid guise, stood near a viewing window that looked out into the endless expanse of stars. His expression was unreadable, but there was a weight to his silence that Daniel had come to recognize. You're not used to this, are you? Daniel asked, breaking the quiet. Depending on someone else. Zorvaxx didn't turn. I am not. It is an unfamiliar burden. Daniel chuckled softly. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is dangerous, Zorvaxx replied, his tone measured. When one holds power, there are few who can be trusted. Allies often mask ambition beneath loyalty. Friendship is a luxury I have rarely indulged. Daniel frowned. Sounds lonely. There was a pause, and when Zorvaxx finally spoke again, his voice was softer. It is. Daniel pushed himself to his feet, crossing the room to stand beside him. The stars beyond the window stretched endlessly, tiny pinpricks of light against a sea of darkness. So what now? That bounty hunter is not going to be the last. You know that. I do. Zorvax's gaze remained fixed on the void. There will always be those who seek to dethrone me. It is the nature of power. Then you have to fight, Daniel said simply. Not just defend yourself. Actually fight back. Zorvaxx finally turned to face him. And what do you suggest, Daniel? Stop doing this alone, Daniel said. You got an empire, right? Use it. Build alliances. Surround yourself with people who want to see you succeed, not just fear you. The Emperor's golden eyes studied him, their intensity almost unnerving. You speak with boldness. Yet boldness alone is not enough to change the course of fate. It's a start, Daniel replied. And you've already taken the first step. A flicker of something, respect perhaps, crossed Zorvax's face. I have long believed that strength lies in isolation. That vulnerability invites ruin. Maybe it does, Daniel said. But you can't close yourself off forever. Sooner or later, someone's going to break through. Better to choose who stands beside you. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths. Zorvaxx turned back to the stars, his gaze distant. When I left my throne, I sought clarity. I hoped to understand the lives of those beyond my empire's reach. Instead, I found chaos and unexpected allies. Daniel gave a small grin. Glad to be of service. And yet, your service is not complete, Zorvaxx said, a hint of amusement in his voice. You have shown courage, Daniel. Loyalty without expectation of reward. These are qualities I value. Daniel shifted, sensing the weight behind the words. Where are you going with this? I offer you a choice, Zorvaxx said, turning to him fully. Return to your life among the stars as you knew it, or remain by my side. As an advisor, an emissary, and a friend, Daniel blinked. You want me to what? Be part of your court? Not in the traditional sense, Zorvaxx clarified. Your perspective is unique. You see beyond titles and traditions. That clarity could serve both me and the Empire. Daniel scratched the back of his head, the weight of the offer settling in. That's a lot to take in. I will not pressure you, Zorvaxx said. The decision must be your own. Daniel looked back at the stars. They had always represented freedom to him. Uncharted paths, endless possibilities. But now, for the first time, he felt something different. A purpose. A chance to make a real difference, not just drift from one adventure to the next. I've spent a lot of time running from things, he admitted. Maybe it's time to run towards something instead. Zorvaxx inclined his head. Then you have made your choice? Daniel took a deep breath. Yeah, I'm in. For the first time, a genuine smile touched Zorvax's lips. Then we have much to prepare for. A soft chime interrupted their conversation, followed by a voice over the intercom. Your ship is ready, Emperor. Zorvaxx turned toward the door. Come, Daniel. It is time we return. They walked together through the station's quiet corridors, side by side. The starship waiting for them was sleek and formidable, its hull marked with the intricate sigils of Zorvax's empire. As they boarded, Daniel felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. He was stepping into the unknown, but this time he wasn't doing it alone. As the ship lifted off, the stars stretched out before them once more, a vast, uncharted future waiting to be written. And they were ready.